Hi, this is Eric again, and this is another post here that I'm doing, another video post I'm doing on January 28th, 2025. And I've been meaning to do this for the past several days. This is what can I say, an assessment, an initial assessment of the Trump presidency, which I suppose you could call it Donald Trump's presidency, the good, bad, and the ugly. So I'm going to go through some of the things that he's done. He's obviously, as we know, I think probably the most predictable characterization of Trump that you hear from many, many people is that he is unpredictable. But in any case, I'm just going to run through some of the issues that have been raised in terms of his personality and presidency, and just give my thoughts on it. So the good things that he's done, in my opinion, and I'm speaking again as a far left anti-imperialist, anti-war type of person, is that, and also class, believing in the concept that income inequality is a terrible problem, and that basically what we're in a situation of world war abroad and class war at home. That is the, in a nutshell, what U.S. policy is all about. And whether you talk about it from a Democratic Party point of view or a Republican point of view, they're basically iterations of that theme. But there are some differences. So, of course, in the last 4 years or so, the whole woke agenda, has come about, and Trump's one of the first things that Trump did was he said from now on we're going to be a country of two genders. So let me just address this. You go to historical, you go to what do I call it? Traditional societies. In most countries, like in Africa, they're talking about, spare us this bullshit about, multiple genders. This, we don't want any part of it. And I'll speak from a kind of like historical, theological point of view. That I trained as a Buddhist monk, and in Buddhism, the original Buddha basically said that it's just for monks, just for males, and because of you could say popular demand, in the fact that his mother, his wife said, "Oh, we should be allowed to become nuns." The Buddha said, okay, well, we can do that. We need to have some extra rules for women because it's not so safe for women to travel alone. Things are, they're not as strong. They could be overpowered. Bad things can happen to them. So, there were certain additional rules for nuns, but basically it was if you wanted to practice as a monastic, you were either a male or a female. That's it. And now he did address the issue that there was something called hermaphrodites, which was sort of somewhere in between a male and a female. But those were not allowed into the order, and neither were people who were gay or anything like that. So, I'm probably stepping on people's toes here. You can, throw mud at me if you want to. I'm just telling you the historical fact that that's the way it was back then. And although people, think that it's really cool and modern to glamorize, 50 different flavors of gender, the reality is that most of the world just does not buy into that. And the reason why I think it's an issue to bring up is because the vast majority of people in the world are not uh, something other than a male or a female. And by making such a big issue out of it, it drains away the energy of the real issue, which is that we're in a world war abroad and class war at home. That is the issue, and all these other side issues are really not, they're not applicable. Yeah, environment is an issue that needs to be addressed, and it's not just climate change. It's the fact pollution, the use of GMOs, the mass production of chemicals that are poisoning everything. These are the kind. That's a legitimate issue because that affects everybody. But by focusing so much on very small minorities, um, which isn't to say that it's okay to persecute people. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that there's an inordinate amount of attention that drains away energy from the real problems. So that's the first thing. The second thing is so I think that basically Trump is echoing the consensus, the broad consensus of the population is both in the United States and around the world. If you really scratch the surface, that's what people say. Now, I live in Thailand, and in Thailand, one of the most what can I say noticeable aspects of what goes on in Thailand is called lady boys, and this has been happening for years and years and years. So one time I was at a temple, and I was practicing meditation there, and the monk was every day he would give a talk before lunch, and one of the monks, not a monk, but one of the students there who was wanted to become a monk, had been a lady boy and was, I guess, doing lady boy dance routines, whatever goes on, and the teacher kind of publicly mocked him, and he said, "There's no way I'm going to let you become a monk." Now, another time, I was at a restaurant with some women, and there was a guy there. He was a monk, and he had lipstick. And she said, "I really don't like that." So people can be tolerant, but if you really ask many people, it really makes them uncomfortable. So, and that this is just you know, there's males and there's females, and that is the massively predominant aspect of male and of mammals and reptiles and so on and so forth. That's how the genetic material is transmitted. It's not transmitted by any other means. It's transmitted between two genders. Period. Okay. Now the second thing was that Trump did and apparently pressured Benjamin Netanyahu for this ceasefire in Gaza, and people, of course, hope it will result in a permanent ceasefire. And a lot has happened because of that. It seems like Netanyahu is his grip on power is slipping, and at the same time, the release of hostages, which took place against Netanyahu's wishes, and basically, apparently, because of Trump's pressure, has made a huge difference in this ongoing conflict between Gaza, between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So, Trump did a good thing by pressuring Benjamin Netanyahu. But we don't know what actually went on behind the scenes because one of the apparent aspects of this deal that he made with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis was that if anything comes up that justifies restarting the war against Palestine, then Israel is free to do it. Which is to say that all this ceasefire it was the good thing is that it did take a lot of pressure off of the people in Gaza, and aid trucks have come in. Although apparently, what I'm hearing recently is that the number that's going through is less than initially was, but at least there's something. There's mass. The Palestinians have voted with their feet. They're saying no, we will not be moved to Jordan, or we will not be used to Egypt. This is our land. Don't tell us what it isn't, that it isn't, and we just demand to have. We're human beings. And the other interesting thing about this situation is that there have been many reports, highly documented reports of Israeli atrocities against Palestinians. However, when these Israeli women, young women, hostages, prisoners were released, they had nothing but praise for their Palestinian Muslim captors. And what that says to me, it raises the question: the Israelis call Palestinians human animals, and they don't even exist. According to some of these people, like Smotrich, there's no such thing as Palestine. There never was a thing as Palestine. It's us European Jews who came in here and stole the land from the people who've been living here for the last 2,000 years. They weren't really Palestinians. They're not really humans. We're the real we're the ones who really own this land, which is exactly the mentality of manifest destiny that the Europeans and then the Americans had towards the native populations in North America. And basically, wherever the Europeans went, they just assumed that they say, "How dare you think that the uranium or the oil under your soil belongs to you? No, it belongs to us because we're superior. We're from Europe. We got white skin. You don't." And this is the mentality of Western imperialism, basically Western civilization. It's been going on for 500 years at least. And as we're seeing, the rest of the world is slowly, gotten its power back, and they're saying, the hell with this. You're not going to treat us this way anymore. And that is the fundamental struggle that's going on right now. But what I wanted to get to mainly is the fact that the Palestinians have shown the Israelis, I think by contrast, who is the real human being here, who treats everyone as humans with decency. We treated your captives with decency. You treated our people as if they were subhumans, like insects, to be wiped out. So who are the real humans here? You Europeans and people who allied themselves with this kind of imperialist mentality, or the indigenous people who actually live in a place. They're part of the land. They don't. It's not like what you can call cosmopolitanism, where you just go to some place. Well, if this place doesn't work out, I'll go someplace else. Well, we've ripped off that country. Let's go find another country to rip off. That's the mentality of the West, and that is not the mentality of the non-West, of the Africans and the Southeast Asians, that the Russians. The Russians have a huge country, and with 100+ different nationalities, they didn't wipe them out the way the Americans and the Europeans went around the world wiping out native populations. Same thing in China. China has, I think, 50 different nationalities. They gave Tibetans the right to have as many kids as they wanted, while restricting the number of kids that Han Chinese, the native Chinese could have for a while. Now they've changed that rule back to allowing people to have more than one child, whatever your nationality is. But the point was that they were allowing other nationalities certain privileges that the Chinese themselves didn't have. So there's that. And that's just another example of this kind of Western racial superiority that just is, the rest of the world is just saying enough. We're not going to put up with that. Okay, well, let's see. No, and the other issue is free speech. And um, uh, there's, I guess Trump signed some kind of order which is furthering the idea that there is free speech, and that social media should not engage in censoring, information. But I think the jury is out on that, because Elon Musk talks about free speech. But I think if people criticize Elon Musk on Twitter or X or anybody else, if you're in a position of power and you have the ability to control speech, and somebody says things about you that you don't like, there's a pretty good possibility that's going to happen. And we'll see. For example, in the case of Scott Ritter, who has been a passionate advocate of nuclear disarmament and nuclear arms control. His passport was taken away from him by Biden, the Biden administration. But I have not heard of Trump reinstating Scott Ritter's passport. So, that will be a litmus test of whether Trump is serious about these kinds of issues. I'd also say that Trump has surrounded himself with a lot of these neocons. One of the people that they're addressing, there are two people who are kind of contrary to that narrative. One is Tulsi Gabbard, who was a soldier in Iraq, and she's now, I think, reached the level of lieutenant colonel. So she's quite a high-ranking officer in the U.S. military, and she's been elevated to be a nominee for the Director of National Intelligence. And the reason why she has been criticized severely for being critical of the war machine. She was very critical of Kamala Harris, for example, when Kamala Harris was running for president in 2020. But Tulsi Gabbard, she's still a lieutenant colonel. She's still in the military, and she talks about the wars and how bad the wars are because her brothers and sisters suffer. But what I don't hear from her is that war is a racket and that she has no business even being in the military if she feels so strongly about it. So I feel like there's an element of opportunism in her character, which I personally experienced when I first supported her campaign in 2016, for example. She on her website, she was advocating sending weapons to the Poroshenko regime, that is the president who was elected after the U.S. coup in 2014. And of course, after that coup, the Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine, who were directly targeted by legislation taking away their rights to speak Russian, um, she they rebelled. This is a fascist coup using elements of the uh, minority of Ukrainians who fought with the Nazis during World War II. Their descendants were weaponized by the CIA, by Victoria Nuland, by the Obama administration to create a coup which overthrew a democratically elected government in Ukraine in 2014. People rebelled against that. And Tulsi Gabbard didn't even know that that was happening. And so she was advocating arming the fascist faction which had taken over, and she didn't even know. She was in the Armed Services Committee, and she's supposed to know what actually goes on, in overseas. She didn't even know it. I had to bring it to her attention because I was donating to her campaign. I was on her email list. So she, somebody mailed me back and said, "Okay, thank you very much. We'll look into this." But then, and she said a lot of good things. I was, I voted for her in the primary in 2016. But then, when it was quite clear that the Democratic Party was going to basically shove her aside, she finally capitulated and supported Joseph Biden, who I absolutely refused to do, which I refused to do. And I wrote her back and I said, I sent you, my donation, and I sent it to you for your campaign. And now you're advocating for Joe Biden. I didn't sign up for Joe Biden. I signed up for you. Give me back my money. Never heard from her again. So I am, maybe she'll be okay. Maybe she won't. Very hard to say. There's other people. I don't really remember. I think the nominee for the FBI. Um, um, they there's a possibility that he will do some house cleaning. We'll have to see. So that's we'll just have to see how that all works out. Maybe it'll be something for the better. because it is true that the national security state is completely out of control. The military is completely out of control, and we'll have to see what happens with that. Now let's see. Now let's talk about Trump's appalling, absolutely appalling ignorance. And is it deliberate display of ignorance to appeal to his base, or is it that he's just stupid, or is he just willfully ignorant? So he talked about, Spain being in BRICS. And he said, somebody says, you mentioned Spain. He said, well, Spain, they're in BRICS, and you know what BRICS is. Well, apparently he doesn't know what BRICS is because Spain is not in BRICS. Um, so, um, and then and then in another interview, he talked about how Russia's economy is doing badly and Putin's messing up and he's not popular and they've lost 1 million soldiers in Ukraine and all this stuff. It's like completely the opposite of reality, and yet he's spouting it. And and people say, well, his advisor, he's not getting, his advisors are misleading him. They're not telling him the truth. And I'm thinking, now let's just think this through for a minute. In 2016 and 2020, for the last 8 years, the U.S. intelligence community has been spouting crap. It's like you cannot believe a word these people say. And occasionally they'll say something truthful, but only as a weapon. But most of the time they're just flat out lying. And so this example of Trump believing, I mean, he knew that there was these 51 intelligence officers saying that Hunter Biden's laptop, that was Russian disinformation. You'd think that after he was attacked so vociferously by these same organizations, that he would hold any of them as being credible at all. And why is he choosing those people instead of people like Scott Ritter, who had his passport taken away because he wanted to go to Russia and film a documentary, to bring people of Russia and people of the United States together as friends, or at least not be at each other's throats, especially the U.S. at Russia's throat, because does Russia have military bases surrounding the United States with nuclear missiles? No, it's the U.S. that does. So, and Scott Ritter is talking about these things. Larry Johnson is another person. Ray McGovern. These are former CIA officers who are saying, speaking the truth. They've been speaking the truth for years. Why is Donald Trump not talking to those people? Why hasn't he not kicked out or just let the guy from the CIA say what he got to say. He says, "Oh yeah, okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, okay, sure. Hey, could you please get Doug McGregor over here right away? I need to get a reality check on this. What about Scott Ritter or Ray McGovern, who used to brief U.S. presidents for a number of years? He was a major officer in the CIA. Let's get him over here." He doesn't do it. So if he doesn't do that, um, he's allowing himself to be lied to, which is a very what is going on in his mentality that he allows himself to be lied to, and he won't get another opinion from people that he actually knows. He knows Doug McGregor. He knows Andre Napolitano, who's a conservative. He's a libertarian, but the guy's a decent person. He doesn't want war. He wants justice, and he has progressive people like Max Blumenthal on. Today he had Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, who has been a peace advocate and activist his entire adult life. So why doesn't Donald Trump bring those people in and talk with them? So there's something really wrong there. And that's one of the main reasons why I don't hold out a lot of hope for his administration. Now, the other issue was about tariffs. And again, Trump, one of the things I want to do, I need to find some images about this. Trump has this image of himself like this. Okay. And you see that expression on his face with his jutted out jaw and his face up like this. And if you search the internet and you look for images of Benito Mussolini, who was the fascist head of Italy, who drove into Italy into the chaos of World War II, and eventually he got his just rewards by being strung up by his heels, and that was how he got compensated for the suffering that he caused. And I'm not advocating that for anybody. I'm just saying that Benito Mussolini had this kind of imperial arrogance in his facial expression, and so does Donald Trump. And I consider this to be a psychological issue that is going to color his presidency. And um, my underlying assumption is that all ideologies are based on psychology. What is the psychology of a person? Trump is a billionaire. His father was an abusive landlord in New York City, and now he's talking about Gaza as a very promising real estate project, and the hell with the Palestinians. So this is the guy's mindset. Is he a true humanitarian? We need to clean up the mess in Gaza. Well, who created the mess, and who's going to pay to clean it up and give the people back their homes? Who's going to do that? Donald Trump doesn't talk about that. So I'm quite pessimistic. The other issue he talked about with Russia is he says I'm going to do Russia a favor, by um, helping them out of their problem in Ukraine. And he says, and he thinks, we think he thinks that Russia is losing the war in Ukraine, that Russia has lost 1 million soldiers when it's lost maybe a tenth of that, that Ukraine, in fact, is losing terribly, that the Ukrainian people were led down the primrose path into catastrophe for their country by the United States. And he thinks that Russia is the one with a problem. So this is another example of where is Trump being just um, deliberately ignorant, or what is going on there? He also talks about tariffs on Russia, and as other commentators have pointed out, Russia has almost no trade with the United States, so it's irrelevant how much of a tariff uh, is placed on Russian products coming into the United States. So who are his economic advisors? Not to mention his security advisors, his intelligence advisors. Who is advising him? It's very strange. The other issue is regarding tax cuts. He talks about giving people tax cuts. He's talking about giving his rich, billionaire friends tax cuts. And you look at his inauguration. Who is sitting behind him? Let's see. Was Bernie Sanders sitting behind him? Uh, was Max Blumenthal, the award-winning journalist, sitting behind Donald Trump? Um, was Richard Wolff or Michael Hudson, the two of the best economists in the United States, who are talking about the problems of a capitalist society that has gone off the rails? Does he have those people sitting behind him? No, he doesn't. He's got the billionaires sitting behind him, and sitting behind them, he's got Marian Adelson, who's an arch Zionist, who gave him probably $100 million. Who is he going to listen to? Money or reason? My guess is that he's going to listen to money, because that is how he's wired. He is not wired to think about the welfare. He talks about make America great again. He's not talking about you or me. He's talking about the billionaire class. He's talking about, you know, America über alles, which is that's the term that the Germans used in the 1930s. Germany above all, make America great again. Is he serious? You know, if he were serious, he'd be talking about we need to be putting massive amounts of money into rebuilding our infrastructure, massive amount of money into building new schools, new hospitals, cutting the costs of medical care, so that and discouraging the use of GMO and junk food in the population. To his credit, hopefully Robert F. Kennedy will Jr. will address that issue, but you don't hear him talking about that. So it's very questionable where his presidency is going to go. And my guess is that it's going to just become another fiasco because it's not the candidates who run for elections, it is the system that produces them. And as long as we have this system, which is all based on money for profit and not based on the welfare of the people, the uplift of our own society, nothing's going to change. So that's it. Okay, so I'll just say that again, if you would like to spread the word about these kinds of issues, and I'm not talking about it for little old Eric here on my Substack channel. What I'm doing is I'm trying to raise consciousness in the society as a whole, and the way to do that is to talk about these things with people. For example, I have a very upper middle class cousin, and her house was the only one that survived in her neighborhood in Pacific Palisades. All the other houses in her neighborhood were burned to the ground. And so I got in contact with her, and I said, you probably ought to be aware of the fact that the LA fire department was defunded, and they sent their equipment to Ukraine, and they didn't have the money or the equipment to save your neighborhood. Maybe you ought to be thinking about that. I don't. She never responded. She never wrote back and said, "Eric, you really make a good point. We really ought to be thinking about that." The American people have a long way to go in terms of raising their consciousness, and that's why the prognosis isn't great. But there's a saying by the Italian um, um, political philosopher Gramsci. He said, "Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will." So we have to raise our own consciousness, raise each other's consciousness, encourage each other, saying, "Yeah, we're not crazy. What they're telling us is bullshit, and we have to be, courageous and say what's really true." So that's the reason why I ask you to buy one of my T-shirts which has some message like that, and of course, please like or share what I'm saying here because I think I'm presenting some ideas that you might not necessarily hear from other people. So thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next time.